Welcome back. You're still watching The World Today on Channels Television. The death toll from Friday's Russian missile barrage on residential buildings in Sloviansk, Ukraine, has risen to 15. Pavel Kirilenko, the head of the Donetsk region's military administration, said in a Telegram post that a further 24 people were wounded in the strikes. Kirilenko said the rescuers pulled 5 people, including a 14-year-old girl, from under the rubble, and the bodies of 10 of the victims were also recovered. At least 8 explosions rocked the city of Sloviansk on Friday, Russian forces targeted with S-300 rockets. The strikes hit apartment buildings, houses, administrative buildings, and a schoolyard. Opposition activist Vladimir Kara-Murza has been sentenced to 25 years in prison for treason and other charges linked to his criticism of the war in Ukraine. The Russian-British former journalist and politician is the latest of a number of Putin opponents to have been arrested or forced to flee Russia. He has denied the charges and been vocally critical of his trial, as well as criticizing the so-called special military operation in Ukraine. Mr. Kara-Murza has also spoken openly against President Vladimir Putin and his government's crackdown on dissent. The 41-year-old played a key role in persuading Western governments to sanction Russian officials for human rights abuses and corruption.
Criminalization of criticism of government action is a sign of weakness, not strength. We support the right of Mr. Kara-Murza and every Russian citizen to have a voice in the direction of their country. Mr. Kara-Murza and countless other Russians believe in and hope for a Russia where fundamental freedoms are upheld, and we will continue to share those hopes and work for that outcome.
Today's verdict is a sad testament to the dark turn this struggle has come to. Regardless of this verdict, freedom-minded people in this country and all over the world recognize Vladimir Kara-Murza as a man of honor and conscience, a resolute defender of civil and political rights, and an ally of the people in their struggle for a free and democratic Russia.
Meanwhile, the European Union has condemned the sentencing of Kremlin critic Vladimir Kara-Murza for 25 years in prison. Spokesperson of EU Foreign Policy, Chief Joseph Borrell, Peter Stano, has described the Russian court ruling as outrageous and politically motivated.
The European Union, of course, was following this case of Mr. Vladimir Kara-Murza very closely. We strongly condemn the outrageously harsh sentence because he got 25 years in prison for politically motivated reasons. This is unacceptable. This is yet another demonstration by Russian authorities of the political misuse of judiciary in order to pressure activists, human rights defenders, and any voices opposing Russia's illegal aggression against Ukraine. This so-called trial, apart from being politically motivated, also did not meet the international standards when it comes to fair and public hearing by a competent, impartial and independent tribunal. The court hearings were not accessible to observers.
Brazilian President Luiz Inácio Lula da Silva again proposed establishing a group of countries not involved with the Russian-Ukraine war to broker peace, saying that he had discussed the matter with his Chinese counterpart, Xi Jinping. The Brazilian president told reporters in Abu Dhabi, where he finished a trip to Asia, that he was trying to gather a group of leaders that prefer to talk about peace rather than war. He also said the United States and the European Union should stop encouraging the war in Ukraine, adding that nations that are supplying weapons should be convinced to stop doing so. The US and EU have been major suppliers of arms and aid to Ukraine following Russia's invasion.
Do jeito que está a coisa, a paz está muito difícil.
Getting peace there is very difficult. President Putin does not take the initiative to stop. Zelensky does not take the initiative to stop. Europe and the United States contribute to the continuation of this war. I think we need to sit at a table and say, that's enough. Let's start talking, because war never brought and will never bring any benefit to humanity. Now we are trying to form a group of countries that have no kind of involvement with the war. do not want the war to continue, that want to build peace in the world, to talk to Russia and Ukraine, but also the United States and the European Union.
Russian President Vladimir Putin has met with Chinese Defense Minister Li Shangfu in Moscow, with both men hailing the military cooperation between their countries. The meeting is coming less than 1 month after Chinese President Xi Jinping's 3-day visit to Moscow. Footage of the meeting shows Mr. Putin shaking hands with Li and then sitting down at a table. Russian Defense Minister Sergei Shoigu was also present. Russia and China, which declared a no-limits partnership, have moved to further strengthen their economic, political and military ties since Moscow sent tens of thousands of troops into Ukraine in February 2022.
Вы прибыли в Россию.
Dear Comrade Minister, I am very glad to see you. You arrived in Russia after a visit to our country by our great friend, my friend, Chairman of the People's Republic of China, Comrade Xi Jinping. I want to emphasize once again that the visit was very productive. Of course, we also touched upon cooperation between our countries through the military departments.
Iran's judiciary has announced prison sentences for 10 unnamed people it says were responsible for the downing of a Ukraine International Airlines commercial flight back in January 2020. Well, according to the official judiciary news site, the prime suspect in the case, identified only as the commander of the Tor M1 surface-to-air missile defense system that shot down the plane with 2 missiles, received a 10-year discretionary sentence for not heeding orders and 3 years for being accessory to semi-intentional murder. It said the unnamed individual will serve a maximum of 10 years in prison, minus time served, and must pay compensation to the families of the 176 victims of that flight. Also, 2 personnel who were operating the missile system each received 1-year sentences, while other officials in Tehran's Air Defense Controls and the Aerospace Division of the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps were given sentences ranging from 1 to 3 years. Also, the suspect will reportedly face more punishments that were not specified by the judiciary. Japanese Foreign Minister Yoshimasa Yahashi has said that the foreign ministers of the group of 7 advanced economies agreed that Russia must withdraw all troops from Ukraine unconditionally. He said this minister also agreed to continue sanctions against Russia and even support to Ukraine. Also, in addition, concerns about the G7 ministers see as China's increasingly aggressive stance on Taiwan and more broadly in the Indo-Pacific region have been in a sharp focus during their 3 days of talks in the Japanese resort. The G7 ministers are keen to demonstrate a unified front, especially after recent comments by French President Emmanuel Macron, which were perceived in some Western capitals as too weak towards China and sparked a backlash. Meanwhile, U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken has thanked Japan in its partnership during the meeting with his Japanese counterpart on the sidelines of the Group of 7 foreign ministers meeting. The G7 foreign ministers meeting runs through Tuesday, April the 18th, at the resort town in Nagano Prefecture and north of Tokyo, and Japan will host the G7 Leaders Summit next month in Hiroshima.
I think, once again, the last day has been just further evidence that we could ask for no better partner than Japan. Your leadership of the G7 has been exceptional, and we're very much looking forward to the leaders meeting that we're preparing here. But beyond that, the partnership every single day on the most challenging issues that we face as an international community that wants to uphold the rule of law, whether it's Ukraine, whether it's DPRK, whether it's trying to advance a free and open Indo-Pacific, as we're both working on together, whether it's strengthening economic ties among countries. In these and so many other endeavors, your leadership has been deeply important and deeply valued, and we really appreciate not only the hospitality here at the G7, but the very good work that's being done under your leadership. So thank you.
The European Commission has rejected bans introduced by Poland and Hungary on Ukrainian grain imports. Both countries say the measures were necessary to protect their farming sectors from cheap imports. The Commission also says that it was not up to the individual member states to make trade policies. While the Commission has said that unilateral moves will not be tolerated, it has not yet specified what measures it will take against Poland and Hungary. Most Ukrainian grain is exported via the Black Sea, but Russia's invasion last year has disrupted export routes and resulted in large quantities of grain ending up in Central Europe. We have Anna Chernikova now, VOA correspondent, to give us more on updates in the Russian and Ukraine war. Thank you very much, as always, Anna, for joining us on the program.
Good evening.
Give us updates on Russian missile strikes in Sloviansk, which happened earlier.
So Ukraine, this past weekend was Easter weekend for Ukraine, and and a religious world was actually very, double shocked with this attack in Sloviansk because it happened on last Friday before Easter, which is a very important day in Orthodox religion world. Unfortunately, this attack, as a result, targeted residential area. We can see the images, terrible images of destroyed residential block and damaged residential blocks. The rescue operation took place for a couple of days. Yesterday, the Donetsk regional administration confirmed that rescue operation has been completed. As a result, 15 people were reported dead, killed, including a 2-year-old boy, and 24 were reported wounded. For the moment, we don't have any information about any changes of this number. So for the moment, this is it. And of course, this is another terrible event happening in this area. In general, over the weekend, a lot of places in the Donetsk region were under attack, and not only in the Donetsk region, also in the south part of the country and southeast and northern parts of the country.
All right, Anna. Now, what do you make of the opposition activist Vladimir Kara-Murza, who was sentenced? I mean, he's an activist and he's been jailed for 25 years. He's been charged with treason and other charges linked to his criticism of the war in Ukraine. What do you make of his sentence?
This is another demonstration of how Russian Federation treat people with different opinions. Apparently, we know that Volodymyr was working with late Boris Nemtsov back in the years, and they were in the same team, and also he was almost killed a couple of times. He was one of those he had this one of the main roles in Magnitsky rule case. So, of course, this person has certain, influence, informational influence, and influence of different mind in Russia. And of course, such sentence demonstrates how such people are, treated in the country. Unfortunately, this is another case to be investigated, I guess, by the international community as well, because definitely this is not the first time we see such kind of arrests and sentences. And again, coming back in the years of Boris Nemtsov of work and other opposition leaders and opposition characters in Russia, we've seen similar similar situations happening with sentencing people and killing people. So unfortunately, this is another case, and of course, I guess we will be expecting a strong international reaction on that.
All right. Now, on a lighter note, Anna, we know that the Orthodox Easter celebration was celebrated in Ukraine. Did Ukrainians celebrate? What was the mood like during this commemoration?
Well, it was second Easter under this full-scale invasion in Ukraine. I should say that it was, in terms of usual, common traditions. It was more. It was closer to pre-full-scale invasion mood because situation was definitely much better with. With everything, I guess, with products, with shelling, amount of shelling happening across the country, not in particular regions, but just in general, massive shelling. So it was easier than last year for Ukrainians. But the mood in general remains very, well, it's war going on. So the mood remains, of course, very, I should say, neutral. So it's no happiness as it usually was of this holiday before the full-scale invasion. And of course, a lot of people had no chance to celebrate this holiday with their families because in Ukraine, this is a family holiday, first of all. And unfortunately, not for everyone, it was a possibility, not even for everyone, it was a possibility to celebrate it at home. So, of course, we're not only talking about Ukrainian soldiers, we're also talking about civilians who either lost their homes or lost their family members. But I should say that, of course, Ukrainians were trying to keep this, at least a little bit of this celebration mood and happy mood present. A lot of people were visiting churches this day, and even in some areas, like we can see the footage now, in some areas people were coming to destroy churches in their communities, and priests were conducting services in these destroyed churches to bring some life in this place and to give people opportunity to celebrate as well. So I should say that in general probably and also it was easier in terms of last year in terms of the shelling. So massive shell, it was no massive air raid siren as it was last year. It was no massive shelling and massive attack as it was last year, but there were attacks in Donetsk region, in Zaporizhia region, in Kherson region, and in the north, south, and east parts of the country close to the border with Russia.
All right, thank you very much. It was good to see smiles on some faces there, despite the war there. Well, thank you very much, Anna Trenikova, VOA correspondent, for your time and contribution, as always, on The World Today.
Thank you.